The Swazi people and the Kingdom of Eswatini today are named after Mswati II, who became king in 1839 after the death of his father King Sobhuza, who strategically defeated the British who occupied Eswatini. Eswatini was a region first occupied by the San people, and the current Swazis migrated from northeast Africa through to Mozambique and eventually settled in Eswatini in the 15th century. Their royal lineage can be traced to a chief named Dlamini I. This is still the royal clan name. About 3/4 of the clan groups are Nguni, the remainder are Soto, Tsanga, others Northeast African and San descendants. These groups have intermarried freely. Swazi identity extends to all those with allegiance to the twin monarchs Ingwenyama the lion, the king, and Ndlovukati the she-elephant, the queen mother. The dominant Swazi language and culture are factors that unify Swazis as a nation. Swazis have lived in present-day Swaziland since around 1750. Ethnically, Swazis are a part of the Nguni people group, originating from the Great Lake areas of Central Africa. Their ancestors were part of the general, gradual migration of Bantu language speakers from Central Africa. The Nguni subgroup, Nkosi Dlamini, broke from the main group and settled in Mozambique, eventually moving into the area known today as Swaziland. The Swazi developed from the Ngwane, one of the Dlamini subgroups, whose separate history can be traced to about 1750, in the southern side of Delagoa Bay, opposite Maputo. There they associated with the Tembe people and engaged in the heavy commerce along the coast, including the export of ivory through sea trade. The Ngwane involvement was one factor that led to the Tembe loss of monopoly on commerce. As the Boers expanded, treaties established boundaries with Transvaal. Though there were wars with the Zulus, the Swazi king Banzeni refused a British request for help in 1879 in the Anglo-Zulu War. Shaka never attacked the Swazi during his expansionist activity. In the mid-1800s Dutch, Boer, and English groups settled in the realm by contract with the king on various occasions. A few years ago, Swaziland has one of the highest population growth rates in the world, 3.7%. In the 1990s, the Swaziland Department of Planning projected 1.1 million by the year 2001. The rate of growth has slowed, due to the heavy toll of AIDS in the last decade. In 2007 an educational crisis developed because of the great numbers of AIDS orphans who had no one to pay school fees for them. The government decided in 2007 it could not pay their fees either. 55% of the population lives in the Mbabane to Manzini area. 3 out of 10 Swazis live in towns or cities. The estimated population of the country in 2008 is 1,128,814. Swaziland has a reputation as one of the most prosperous countries in sub-Sahara. Swaziland's economy is tied to the South African economy through the Rand Monetary Area and the Common Customs Area. Although considered by many, including World Bank, as a middle-income nation, a third-world economy emerges when one looks closely. The Swazi people are closely allied with the Zulu, Ndeb and other Nguni peoples by culture, language, and history. The Ngwane maintained a separate identity and were not always on good terms with their cousins. The establishment of Swaziland was a strong factor in their maintaining their separate identity. The Swazi people today make up a little over half the population of Swaziland, but it is ruled as a Swazi kingdom. Swati is the home language of the Swazi people. Business and commerce are conducted in English. Zulu was used in literature and education before independence. Many Swazis also speak Zulu. Swati and its neighboring languages are written in Latin characters, following the spelling conventions used in Nguni languages. One source says that there are about 2.5 million speakers of the Swati language. However, the 2005 edition of the Ethnology, World Authority, and ISO Standard for Information on the Languages of the World, gives the total in all countries as 1,706,924. 1,013,193 of these live in South Africa. 1996 census, only about 650,000 in Swaziland. The Swati, or Swazi, language is a member of the Nguni language family, which includes Xhosa, Ndebele and Zulu. The ancestors of the Nguni came into contact with the Khoisan-speaking peoples, whose language has click sounds as consonants. The Nguni languages now have several borrowed sounds from these languages and some vocabulary items. Mswati has lost all but one of the click sound sets. Mswati is the mother tongue of all the ethnic Swazi people, and the language is spoken by many people of other ethnic groups. The ordinary Swazi derives rights to land access and use by virtue of his/her residence or membership in a particular homestead, umuti. According to Hilda Cooper and Brian Marwick, the homestead is patriarchal, with a male homestead head, umnumzana, assuming primary powers, but the position of the main wife is important in family life. The homestead head determines resource allocation such as land distribution, makes major decisions regarding both production, plowing and types of crops grown, and economic expenditures, and mobilizes homestead labor. The traditional Swazi homestead was circular in shape. The dwelling huts and cooking huts were built around the circumference of a circle, forming two horns embracing the courtyard and partially enclosing the cattle byre. Homestead residents have access as individuals to arable land and as members of the larger community to communal pasturage. Following the arrival of Europeans in Swaziland, homesteads changed. Customarily tenured land was reduced in area, fragmented, and taxed. New agricultural methods, new hybrid seeds and fertilizers, and new technologies were introduced. At the same time, men migrated within Swaziland and to South Africa in search of income, thereby reducing labor power, altering sex roles, and changing the locus of decision-making within homesteads. When homestead production activities changed, the social composition and physical organization of homesteads also changed. Subsistence and commercial activities. Swazi homesteads focus on subsistence agricultural activities, primarily the cultivation of maize, sorghum, beans, groundnuts, and sweet potatoes. Maize had been essentially unknown until the mid-19th century, at which time it was introduced and gradually replaced sorghum as the staple crop. Despite the importance of agriculture to the homestead economy, cattle are the basis of wealth and status. Swazi have the cattle complex typical of many Eastern African tribes. Cattle provide for individual food and clothing needs as well as serving wider economic and ritual purposes. Industrial arts. Smithing, a hereditary occupation for men that requires long apprenticeship, is surrounded by taboos. It was, at one time, the most exacting and remunerative of the industrial arts. The iron hose, knives, and various kinds of spears, weapons of war, produced by smiths were in great demand. The smithy was built at a distance from the homestead and put off limits to women. In the past, the Swazi also had specialists in copper and brass. Today wood carving is important but is mainly limited to functional objects, such as meat dishes and spoons. Wood carvers are not required to enter a restricted apprenticeship and do not receive the status accorded healers, or even smiths. Pottery making lies within the domain of women, who, using the coil technique, produce different sizes and shapes of drinking and cooking vessels. Swazi specialists do not have at their disposal markets comparable to those found in West Africa. Trade. Swaziland's main export crop is sugar, based on irrigated cane. Several other cash crops, including maize, rice, vegetables, cotton, tobacco, citrus fruits, and pineapples, are traded both within and outside the country. Its mineral wealth, which consists of iron ore, coal, diamonds, and asbestos, is mined for export. Meat and meat products are also exported. The industrial estate at Matsafa produces processed agricultural and forestry products, garments, textiles, and many light manufactures. The main imports are motor vehicles, heavy machinery, fuel and lubricants, foodstuffs, and clothing. Division of labor. Swazi division of labor proceeds according to sex, age, and pedigree. Most men know how to construct house frames and cattle kraals, plow, tend and milk cattle, sew skins, and cut shields. Some men are, or were in the past, particularly accomplished at warfare, animal husbandry, hunting, and governing. Most women know how to hoe, tend small livestock, thatch, plait ropes, weave mat/baskets, grind grain, brew beer, cook foods, and care for children. Some women specialize in pot and mat making. Age determines who will perform tasks associated with ritual performances. Rank determines who will summon people for work parties in district and national enterprises and who will supervise the workers. Work parties, sometimes consisting of hundreds or thousands of workers, compete in separate groups of men and women and receive customary rewards of thanks from the host according to rank, age, sex, and locality. Land tenure. Land access rights in Swazi areas, as opposed to freehold areas established by the colonial land partition of 1907, are held by the community as a whole, and the king, representing the entire Swazi nation, is responsible for its allotment to chiefs. The chiefs, in their turn, distribute land to homestead heads. Swazi citizens can pledge allegiance to a chief and rulers and thereby obtain rights to land according to 4 acquisition methods: kukhanta, direct grant by the chief; kubikwe, direct grant by another individual; inheritance; and kubolika umalaba, being lent land by another individual. Rose, 1992, has maintained that land disputes commonly center around problems of use rights, boundaries, cattle trespass, inheritance, natural resource ownership and management, or chiefly legitimacy and territorial jurisdiction. In the late 20th century, land disputes have intensified or become more frequent, as populations have expanded or migrated toward employment centers. New varieties of disputes, often in association with development projects, example construction of buildings, roads, or dams, have arisen. Kin groups and descent. At the center of each Swazi homestead is the biological family, extended through classificatory kinship to maternal and paternal groups, the largest of which is the clan. The clan, as the farthest extension of kinship, contains a number of lineages in which direct descent can be genealogically traced over 3 to 8 generations. The exogamous patrilineal clan, Sibongo, with members usually residing in the same locality, Sifunza, is the fundamental unit of Swazi's social organization. Kinship terminology. One's father is called Yababe, whereas father's older brother is Yababe Lomkhulu, and father's younger brother is Yababe Lomkane. One's father's sister is Yababe Lomsikati, female father. One's own mother, the other wives of his/her father, and his/her mother's sisters are called Umake. One's father's brother's wife is also Umake, and one's mother's sister's husband is also Yababe. One's mother's brother and his wife are called Umalum. Grandfathers are called Yababimkolu, and grandmothers Ugago, but the kinship terms can be specified by the addition of explanatory words. Example: the paternal grandfather may be called Yababimkolu Lotalababe to distinguish him from the maternal grandfather. All grandchildren are Umtukolu. Marriage and family. Marriage. Clan membership is important in regulating marriage and succession. Marriage with a person of one's own paternal clan is prohibited, although permissible for the king, but allowed with a woman of the maternal clan. At one time, a preferred form of marriage was the sororate, in which a man married his wife's sister, who became the subsidiary wife, in Lanti. A woman retains her paternal clan name upon marriage, but her children acquire at birth their father's clan name. Paternal rights are acquired by the man's family through the transfer to the woman's family of bride wealth, lobala, valuables such as cattle, and, in modern times, possibly cash. Bride wealth varies with the rank and education of the bride. Marital residence is virilocal, the bride goes to live with her husband and in-laws. In contemporary Swaziland, several forms of marriage are found: traditional marriages, love matches, arranged marriages, and marriage by capture, the latter being uncommon and not always involving the exchange of bride wealth, as well as Christian marriages. More individuals are eloping or remaining single. The marriage ceremony, particularly for high-ranking couples, involves numerous and sometimes protracted ritualized exchanges between the families of the man and the woman, including singing, dancing, wailing, gift exchange, and feasting. Divorce, which is discouraged in association with traditional marriages, although permissible in situations of adultery, witchcraft, and sterility, proceeds according to a variety of arrangements. Domestic unit. Within a complex homestead are households. Each household, Indlu, generally consists of one nuclear family, a man, his wife, and their children, whose members share agricultural tasks and eat from one kitchen. When there are several households on the homestead, each consists of a simple polygynous family, an extended agnatic family, or a complex family grouping. Sometimes a wife has an attached co-wife, Inlanti, who, along with her children, forms part of the same house. A married son and his wife and dependents occasionally form another house within the wider house of his mother. Inheritance. Upon the death of a homestead head, Umnamzana, the family council of agnates, including full and half-brothers of the head, his own and brothers' senior sons, etc., meet to discuss the disposal of his estate. The council primarily considers the household divisions prevailing within the homestead group during the life of the head as well as the land allocations made by him during his life. In monogamous families, the largest land allocation and administrative responsibilities usually go to the oldest son, whereas in large polygynous families, the largest land allocation and administrative responsibilities usually go to the oldest son of the senior wife who is named the general heir, Inkosana, and acts as guardian over the special heirs of each wife's house's estate. When a woman dies, her property, example her pots, mats, and implements, goes, by tradition, to the wife of her eldest son, who resides in the same homestead or village, unlike her married daughters. In contemporary Swaziland, traditional rules of inheritance are not applicable when a Christian marriage, which disallows polygyny and which is governed by Roman Dutch law, is contracted. Socialization. Pre-adolescent girls play and help their mothers with minor domestic chores and child care, whereas pre-adolescent boys play and run errands around the homestead until they are old enough to accompany their age mates to the fields with the herds. Fathers sometimes play a small role in child rearing, particularly if they are employed at distant locations within Swaziland or in South Africa. The Swazi have not circumcised males since King Mswati's reign in the mid-19th century, but both boys and girls traditionally had their ears cut, yakuzika tindalb. By custom, a boy who has reached puberty is tended by a traditional healer, and a girl who has had her first menstruation is isolated in a hut for several days and instructed by her mother about observances and taboos. A boy learns about manhood and service to the king when he joins his age, warrior, regiment, Lobamba. Social organization. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the dominant Dlamini clan created a hierarchy of control by amalgamating and ranking through conquest, treaty, and peaceful incorporation over 70 disparate, equal clans under a hereditary monarchy. The Swazi hierarchical ranking system came to consist of several units: the polygynous patriarchal family, the hierarchy of clans and lineages, the dual monarchy, the age grades, and the groups of specialists. The stability of the ruling elite's control was achieved through a balance of power among the king, his mother, princes, and commoners, as well as between the dual monarchy and the chiefs. Moreover, Swazi hierarchy harmoniously blended authoritarian political privileges of birth with egalitarian participation in age classes and councils. With the coming of Europeans in the late 19th century, the traditional hierarchy was forced to compete with a new, colonial administrative hierarchy that was based upon race and oriented toward the accumulation of wealth. After Swaziland achieved independence in 1968, a complex administrative system was fused together from parts of the dual hierarchy, see political organization. Currently, traditional hierarchical arrangements are most threatened by the developing class system that found root in the economic and social changes of the colonial period. Political organization. Swaziland's government is a monarchy. Its political organization is characterized by dualism, The parallel political structures consist of a traditional and a modern, post-colonial, hierarchy. At the apex of the traditional hierarchy is the Swazi monarch, who as a member of the Dlamini clan, holds supreme executive, legislative, and judicial power. He governs with the assistance of his traditional advisors. At the middle level of the traditional hierarchy are chiefs who consult with their council of elders, landlocked, and at the lowest level are homestead heads who consult with their Phondvo, lineage council. The modern structure, through which the monarch's power is also delegated, consists of modern, statutory bodies, such as a cabinet and a parliament that passes legislation, subject to approval by the king, which is administered in 4 regions, and less formal governmental structures, consisting of Swazi courts and 40 sub-regional districts in which the traditional chiefs are grouped. Social control. The colonial powers altered some Swazi customary legal rules and procedures and imposed Roman Dutch law as the general law. As a result, Swaziland developed a dual system of law and courts consisting of traditional councils, in which procedures are not controlled by legislative enactments or by codified legal rules, and modern courts, which have been formalized by national legislation. Traditional councils consist of the clan/lineage council, Phondvo, the chief's council, landlocked, and the king's council. Modern courts consist of both Swazi and European-influenced courts at lower levels, including the Swazi courts, 2 courts of appeal, the higher Swazi Court of Appeal, and the king on the Swazi-influenced side, and the subordinate courts, the High Court, and the Court of Appeal on the European-influenced side. The Swazi Courts Act of 1950 provided for the formal composition of customary courts, the type of law they may apply, customary law, the procedure to be followed, and the limits of the court's jurisdiction over persons. Swazis may exercise some discretion, depending upon individual circumstances, in choosing which legal forum to pursue a case. Conflict. Swazis were engaged in tribal warfare until the imposition of European control in the late 19th century. Following the arrival of European concessionaires, severe conflicts developed between Swazis and Europeans regarding alienated land, see history and cultural relations. Throughout history, conflicts arose between Swazi clan and lineage members, commonly co-wives and half-brothers, in association with daily interactions and were often attributed to suspected acts of witchcraft and sorcery. In modern-day Swaziland, interpersonal conflicts are influenced by many social and economic changes, including altered sex roles, increased job competition, labor migration, and the growth of an educated elite. Some Swazis believe that the legal prohibition of witch-finding exacerbates conflicts by protecting evildoers who promote themselves at the workplace and in personal affairs through the use of magic. New or intensified pressures upon status relationships in stratified Swazi society are also producing conflicts. Religious beliefs. Adherents of traditional religion believe, in an aloof supreme being known as Mkolomkanda, who fashioned the earth but who demands no sacrifices and is neither worshipped nor associated with the ancestral spirits. Swazi men play important roles in Swazi traditional religious life, offering sacrifices for the ancestral spirits, who are ranked, as are humans. Despite the important role of men in religious matters, female diviners also communicate with spirits, and the Queen Mother acts as custodian of rain medicines. Swazi ancestral spirits take many forms, sometimes possessing people and influencing their welfare, primarily their health, see religious practitioners and medicine. Methodists established the first mission in Swaziland. Currently, many Christian sects exist in Swaziland, ranging from the more eclectic Catholics to the more rigid Afrikaner Calvinists. A majority of Swazis are registered as Christian. Many converts belong to nationalistic separatist Zionist churches, which practice a flexible dogma and great tolerance of custom. Christianity as practiced by Swazis has been influenced by existing traditions, including beliefs in ancestral spirits, and traditional religion has been influenced by Christianity. Religious practitioners. Swazi practitioners of traditional religious beliefs articulate belief systems and link the spirit and human worlds. Their primary role, as healers, is to identify and correct the imbalances between these worlds, imbalances that lead to human misfortunes and illnesses. Swazi healers are of three types: herbalist, about 50%, diviner medium, about 40%, and Christian faith healers, about 10%. Diviners are usually accorded more prestige than herbalists because ancestral spirits are believed to work through them directly. They are called to their profession through spirit possession and may become novices in training in a ritual school run by a master diviner. Although the healer categories overlap, in general, herbalists work primarily with natural materia medica, example roots, bark, leaves, whereas diviner mediums diagnose the mystical causes of illness, rely on spirit possession, and perform the Phondvo ceremony, through which agents of illness are removed. Since the late colonial period, 1960s, most healers, more than 80%, have been officially registered and are thus subject to taxation. Many belong to healers' organizations. Ceremonies. The annual ritual of kingship, the Nkwala, a ceremony rich in Swazi symbolism and only understandable in terms of the social organization and major values of Swazi life, has been described in numerous writings by Hilda Cooper. According to her, the central figure is the king, who alone can authorize its performance. The Nkwala reflects the growth of the king, and his subjects play parts determined by their status, primarily rank and sex. Before this ceremony, which is sometimes described as a first fruit ceremony or a ritual of rebellion, can be performed during a 3-week period each year, considerable organizational and preparatory activities must be undertaken. For example, water and sacred plants are collected at distant points to strengthen and purify the king. Thereafter, the oldest warrior regiment opens the Nkwala. Sacred songs that are concerned with the important events of kingship, a king's marriage to his main ritual wife, the return of ancestral cattle from the royal grave, and the burial of kings, as well as dances are performed. Themes of fertility and potency predominate. Celebrants are adorned in striking clothing, including feathers of special birds and skins of wild animals. Cooper maintains that the Nkwala symbolizes the unity of the state and attempts to reinforce it, therefore, it dramatizes power struggles between the king and the princes, or between the aristocrats and commoners, with the Swazi king ultimately triumphing. Cooper, Beidelman, and other scholars have discussed other Swazi royal rituals, including the reed dance and rainmaking rites, as well as ceremonies that involve Swazis as individuals or groups, including funerals, marriages, and initiations. Arts. Swazi implements and utensils, such as clay pots and baskets, are unornamented, serving mainly a utilitarian purpose. Woodcarvers did not traditionally produce masks or sculptured figures, although in the late 20th century schools have encouraged woodcraft for the tourist trade. Musical instruments are crafted to accompany popular singing and dancing activities. Among those instruments used either in the past or present are the livani, hunting horn, impalampala, kudu bullhorn, ligabu, calabash attached to a wooden bow, and livang, wind instrument made from a plant. Drums and European instruments have been introduced. Medicine. Swazis resort to various medical practitioners, primarily biomedical or traditional practitioners. Traditional practitioners retain their high standing among the Swazi, as indicated by their relatively high ratio within the general population, currently, about 1 person in 110. About half of traditional healers are female, and the vast majority are diviner mediums, see religious practitioners. Swazis believe that most serious diseases do not simply happen, they are created and sent by a person of ill will. Furthermore, Swazis differentiate between diseases or conditions regarded as African or Swazi and those that are foreign, emphasizing that the former, such as madness caused by sorcery, is a Swazi disease best treated by traditional medicine and practitioners, and that the latter, such as cholera, is a foreign disease best treated by Western Orthodox medicine and biomedical practitioners. According to Green, 1987, Swazi healers claim to be most effective in healing sexually transmitted diseases, sorcery and bewitchment types of ailments, children's illnesses, and migraines. By tradition, a recognized Swazi healer diviner would commonly receive an initial gift of a goat, spear, or other articles, an intermediary gift of meat from a beast that was slaughtered during treatment, and a cow given in thanks for effecting a successful cure. The diviner's fee did not constitute a regular stipulated payment but did depend on her or his technique and the seriousness of the situation. Nowadays a healer may demand set fees for particular medicines and services. Death and afterlife. Swazi mortuary ritual varies with both the status of the deceased and his or her relationship with different categories of mourners. The more important the deceased, the more elaborate the rites given the corpse, particularly so for the king. The closer the relationship through blood or marriage of the deceased and a mourner, the greater the stereotyped performance demanded by the spirit from the mourner. A headman is traditionally buried at the entrance of the cattle enclosure, and his widows, children, siblings, and other relatives are expected to grieve dissimilarly and for different lengths of time. Widows grieve longer than do widowers. A widow may be expected to continue her husband's lineage through the Levirate, Njina, in which she is taken over by a brother of her deceased husband. The spirit of the deceased may manifest itself in illness and in various omens, sometimes it materializes in the form of a snake. Ancestral spirits, acting as custodians of correct behavior and moral standards, inflict suffering on their descendants only as just punishment, not out of malice. The head of the family appeals to the ancestors and directs offerings to them at specific domestic events such as births, marriages, and deaths and during hut-building activities. Swaziland is a peaceful country, having struggled for years against outside forces, Zulus, British, Boers, and land-hungry settlers. The country of Swaziland was the tribal land of the Mswati people under their hereditary rulers. Swaziland was recognized as an independent nation by Britain, Portugal, and South African entities in a series of treaties, conventions and negotiations, dated from the early 1800s. In 1894 Swaziland requested to become a British protectorate to halt the encroachments of Boers and Portuguese. During the years of British consolidation in southern Africa, Swaziland remained separate. They did not participate, for instance, in the Union of South Africa, formed in 1910. Swaziland preferred to remain a protectorate. It was never a colony. The country gained independence in 1968. The royal line continued in administration over the decades of the protectorate. Changes in government introduced a newfound democracy with multi-party elections held for the first time in 1993 for seats of the lower house of parliament. The king is still highly respected. King Mswati III was crowned king in 1986 at the age of 18. During the 20th century many Swazis have felt free to move freely into South Africa. The Swazis love colorful ceremonies and traditional dress is commonly worn even today by both men and women. Marriage arrangements are initiated by a request to the fathers of the couple by the mothers of the couple. There are two types of marriages. First, a civil right based on Western marriage conventions, prohibiting polygamy, but allowing divorce. The second category is traditional marriage. In this kind of marriage, the husband can take additional wives, where dowry, lobola, is paid by the man's family for each wife. For a woman, this marriage is binding, and even if her husband dies and she remarries according to civil rights, the children of the new marriage are considered to belong to the first husband. Girls help around the home, care for younger siblings and collect water. Boys herd cattle and goats. Training children begins as soon as the child is able to speak. Children do not rise when an elder enters the room, but respect must be shown in various ways. Inkwala is a sacred ceremony of kingship and is observed as an annual festival of thanksgiving, prayer, and atonement. It's the most important and sacred of all ceremonies. It is called the ceremony of kingship because it is led by the king. Umalanga is a reed dance, a ceremony meant to attract unmarried girls, from whom the king chooses new brides. Dancing and singing, including praise singing, are prominent in Swazi culture. Pottery and carving were minor arts. Swazi traditional marriage is called Mtsimba. It is usually on a weekend in dry season, June to August. The bride and her relatives go to groom's homestead on Friday evening. On Saturday morning, the bridal party sit by nearby river, eat goat or cow meat offered by groom's family. In the afternoon, they dance in the groom's homestead. On Sunday morning, the bride, with her female relatives, stabs ground with a spear in man's cattle kraal. Later she is smeared with red ochre. The smearing is the high point of marriage. No woman can be smeared twice. Bride presents gifts to husband and his relatives. Umalanga is one of the well-known cultural events in Eswatini held in August/September for young unmarried girls to pay homage to the Ndlovukati. Inkwala is another Swazi cultural event held in December/January depending on the phases of the moon. This ceremony, also known as the first fruits ceremony, marks the king's tasting of the new harvest. Thank you for watching this video.